Welcome to Home Business TV. Greetings and welcome to the Home Business Podcast. I'm Richard Kamenerson, your host. Do you got ROI? Are you getting a return on investment, ROI, from your digital marketing? To survive as entrepreneurs, we must make digital marketing part of our promotional toolkit. So in today's podcast, I talk with Corey Morris, founder and CEO of Voltage, a premier digital agency focused on digital marketing and websites. So Corey Morris, please say hello to our audience. How are
Hello.
things going today?
And going all right. Excited to be with you. Thanks.
World from there. But Corey has spent 20 years working in strategic and leadership roles focused on growing client brands and ROI generating digital strategies. His industry leadership, client success, and community focused work led to a local direct marketer association Marketer of the Year award. Corey will help us to improve our digital marketing and get more ROI from it. So first, Corey Morris, let's get to know you a little bit better. Talk with us about your journey into launching a business to help other businesses improve in their digital marketing.
Yeah. So I have kind of a non-traditional entrepreneurial journey. I started my career in advertising and marketing agencies on the digital side. Worked into some leadership positions through those, and ultimately got to a point of going through a succession plan at Voltage. So I'm not one of the founders.
Oh,
I technically did found my entity, and made an asset purchase going through a transition plan from one of the original co-founders. And I've since founded another LLC, but went from employee to owner, which as I've talked with peers is and the way I've zigzagged around, not necessarily the way it's written out in a textbook of how you'd go about
well,
it.
what the heck? I mean, you know where all the skeletons are buried if you're going from being an employee to becoming an
Yeah.
owner.
Well, and I had been president before getting to that point too. So yeah, to your point, any of the skeletons, many of them I would have created
Yeah, it's
myself.
like, hey, that's on you.
Yeah.
Well, well, cool. That's a fascinating journey and one I think there's everybody seems to have their own path into entrepreneurship, and that's certainly a cool one to go in with the company and then get an ownership position. I think that happens quite a lot in the business world. So congratulations on that. But let's dig into the core issue of getting more ROI from our digital marketing. First, like the basics in a nutshell. How do you get started for somebody who doesn't clicking in on this for the first time? How do you get started in digital marketing?
Yeah, so I've been doing it for a long time, going back to when things weren't open source, before social media emerged, and when we were calling it online or internet marketing. They unified around the term digital marketing. But a lot of things, the way they emerge, like social media, for example, and even things to this day, you'll find in search engine optimization and other areas are um, a lot of activity driven, checklist driven, best practice driven in things that you do. There are things that you know you should do and you do them, or somebody's got a great idea or checklist, or you look at how somebody else is doing them and you apply that to your own business. Unfortunately, there's oftentimes I've encountered it, being the owner of an agency and talking with a lot of people and a lot of prospects and clients as a coach or advise them or bring them into the fold to partner with us. There's a lot of activity without a connection to return on investment. And unfortunately, marketing often and advertising often gets looked at like an expense or a vendor relationship instead of an investment where you have an expected return on investment back. And if you don't know that for every dollar you spend, what you're getting back out of it, then you're just paying for or investing your own time in a set of activities that have a disconnect or a gap somewhere. And I never want anybody to be in a position of feeling like they wasted X% of their time or their budget or dollars that could have been somewhere else in their business, without knowing the real impact or the test of well, let's just stop doing it and see how it impacts our business. That's not the answer or the way I want people to go about it.
So, like when looking at ROI, that's a way of also then measuring, you know, for relative effectiveness of the different ways you can market, and then, choosing the best option.
Absolutely. And in many cases it's complex and complicated. While we can measure, and what pulled me toward the digital side of things at the beginning of my career is the ability to measure it, see the impact and the results in real time or close to it. But while we can measure it, it's tricky. And the
Mhm.
attribution, especially if you're a service-based business that you're looking for leads, or if you're brick and mortar and you're waiting for people to walk in, be able to connect the dots all the way through. And the longer your sales cycle or the more education you have to do, it's hard to know that this touch point or these 7 different impressions and touch points might have led to something over 12 months, and to be able to track that all the way
Yeah.
through and understand how they all work together versus someone going to Google for the first time, knowing what they want, plugging it in and coming to my website and purchasing today. I mean, that's a holy grail, but that's not
Right.
not the way
The great
most
mystery of trying to
buyer
figure out
journeys
where your
work.
leads are coming from.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Most funnels or customer journeys are much more complicated than that.
right. It just gets more complicated when you throw in all the elements of the digital marketing mix. But maybe, Corey, how did you come up with the term you use of start planning process, START planning process? If you could maybe talk about this a little bit more, help us get started.
Yeah, so as an acronym, I was really working on trying to articulate a process to help clients or anybody out there to arrive at their own digital marketing plan, or what I call a digital marketing success plan. And going back to what we just talked about with ROI, I want it to be with intention, with conviction, and understanding what you're doing and why you're doing it, and how it connects. So like any other agency or tech company or anything, we overcomplicate things. We iterate and on things, and every time I would go through the process with a client, it might look a little bit different, hard to, full of acronyms, full of nerdery essentially. But in terms of trying to get it down to a process that's approachable, that you could buy my book and try to go, work on self-implementing it, or see where I'm providing things where you have gaps in your own planning process. That really led to developing the start planning process. So there's 5 steps in it. And the first naturally is strategy. And in many cases, I talked about earlier activities, and those I put in the bucket of tactics, which is second. But getting your strategy set first, and that's an understanding of what strengths you already have. That's doing some auditing to understand what's working well currently, where there might be weaknesses, getting everyone aligned on from stakeholders of what KPIs are that you want to track, and what the ultimate business outcome is that marketing can, the deepest impact it can have to move the needle in terms of
And sometimes they
revenue or
talk about
profit.
strategy as like what direction you can move, or where's the best direction you should move in.
Yeah. Who were in answering any fundamental questions that we may not have answered, or that might have been moving targets of our target audience, and how we're going to reach them, where we're going to reach them, how they move the needle for our business when we do engage with them. So getting that strategy defined in a way that's not 10 pages long, but in a 3 or 4 sentence statement of who we're trying to reach, why, what the critical value is we offer them, and putting any financial or monetary or performance metrics against that aren't just fluffy marketing KPIs like page views. Well,
Right.
okay, that's fine, but how does a page view or a visit to a website or even a conversion translate to revenue, and to make sure that's connected all the way through? So getting that right in the strategy phase is critical, because then that's the lens we're going to look through in the other 4 phases. That allows us to then move to the T, which is tactics, and putting all tactics out there, all opportunities, all channels, platforms, the things that we know are working, that we love. But even testing out, it's much easier at this point to do research, use research tools, and understand, is Facebook right? Is LinkedIn right? Is what kind of email marketing opportunities do we have? What kind of Google ads or SEO could we be doing? and to test them out with research tools at this point, instead of just saying, okay, let's go put an ad budget out there and find out in a really expensive way with Google or others that it works or doesn't work. So using those research tools at our disposal at this point, and then it flows much faster from here, because then we get into the A, which is application phase. This is looking at the assets we need, from content to ads, ad creative, to website enhancements we might need. Then to the R, which is for review or reporting, to pull it all together and understand how we're going to measure it, how we're going to quantify it back against our goals that we set in the strategy phase. And then the second T, which is transformation, the last phase, that's planning it out, resourcing it, and getting the full plan to a place where it can be actionable, accountable, and not something we put on the shelf when we get busy 2 months in.
That's kind of a cool system. You start off with the big picture of where you can go and what you can do, and then get into tactics of how you're gonna get there and follow it all the way through to transformation and kind of feeding back and putting a plan in place. I mean, you're talking to a military personnel with that strategy and tactics. We've had, entire courses on that, and you know, the principles behind that apply right directly to a business with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, well, and this is intended to be a process that you can get through in 60 to 90 days as well, right? Not to be iterating on it or planning to be planning, or you know, you know, going into the tactics first and then regretting it later when
Right.
you've spent a lot of money without any return on it. So it's intended to be this process that you can get through with resisting the temptation to start doing stuff while you're in it, get in and out of it, use that plan as your roadmap. And now it's not in somebody's head. It's not overly personal. If it's on paper and we have to come challenge it 2 or 3 months in, or somebody has a great idea that we want to go, and we don't get pulled in different directions based on what any stakeholder or anybody in our
Right.
industry or what a competitor does. We can be grounded in having a plan, and we all know why we're doing what we're doing.
Imagine a challenge here is to try to keep it simple and straightforward and avoid analysis paralysis and keep focused on the important elements of it.
Yeah, I provide a sample outline in one of the appendices in the book, but yeah, it can get complicated fast and can be, documents on top of documents. The final deliverable of how we do it, and the kind of the way in my agency that we partner with clients and work them through the process, is a high level deck with, maybe 15 to 20 slides max. And yes, there's links out to spreadsheets on top of spreadsheets with the
Right.
raw research, but being able to go back to sentences and statements where you have it defined well, and you can have a common denominator, whether it's, if you're in a huge organization, you've got it from the C suite down to the practitioner who's doing the super deep depth level of subject matter expertise like SEO, or you've got a network of partners that you're working with, or resources or contractors, or you're bringing on a new employee. They can get it early on and then go drill down into the details. It's not like, the rocket
Right.
science manual that we have to pull out and only one person understands it.
Yeah, so it's integrated, and I think the key thing I'm picking out is it gives you a systematic approach so that you're rolling through and putting together something that starts off making sense, and at the end it'll make sense, through that process. So that's a good nugget on this. Kind of looking at this, how does this digital marketing then reinforce a company's brand?
Yeah. So the company's brand, I actually have an article I write for Search Engine Land and Search Engine Journal, and one of my upcoming articles is comes from some conversations I had over the past year with colleagues who own branding agencies. I'm a specialist, kind of niched into search and web. And but I come from a background where we used to do branding. And so I get it enough, and I've been in that world where I understand some of the challenges if you're on that end, kind of the front end or the top level of establishing some of the aspects that go into marketing, and being on the other end, like some of my team who are down in the weeds of Google Ads or SEO, where they're close to that conversion and that last click. And so some of the challenge, it's easier to talk about ROI down here, but and see it more immediately. It's harder on the brand side, but where we're really clear when we get into the start planning process and the strategy phases, we're going to have challenges if we have questions about brand strategy and distinctive
Yeah, because
attributes.
each of them are their own strategy. So how do you link one strategy with the next?
Well, and if we don't have it or don't have it's not clear, that's a challenge for us, and that's where I say time out. We need to kind of work backwards and take a step back and go define that, or the product development, or sales apparatus, or customer service. If there are any questions in what those are, we're in trouble. But the brand strategy needs to be carried all the way through the digital marketing, and it helps because you don't want a no offense to my team or others in the industry, but you don't want someone doing paid search or SEO having to make decisions on what wording to use or what phrases for
Yeah, you got to
ads or for
maintain, it's got to
content.
be consistent across all the different platforms.
Absolutely. You want to have a guide and you want to have that North Star to go back to, and you want it to be differentiated from others because what happens is if we don't have a strong enough brand to weave through all of that, we're then driving leads or driving sales or losing sales based on things that are commoditized like price. Because, and if we're, unless we're the low price leader, we probably don't want
Right.
those leads. And we didn't do a good enough job of telling the story and the core competencies all the way through and selling on the benefits that are unique versus just putting ourselves in the bucket with everybody else on common language or what we find out there.
Got to differentiate yourself. We're kind of taking this to the next level. How do we get more direct marketing engagement? Get that actual engagement at the
Yeah,
end of
so
these processes.
yeah, engagement is key. And as algorithms are changing, as search engines and I know we'll probably get into AI, but as the world is changing online and how we consume content, the it, engagement is not necessarily the top metric. It's an indicator metric. We need it to get to the ultimate the conversions that we want or what the ultimate goal is for our online traffic and sources. But taking a quality versus quantity approach is important. So I always work backwards from what the end goal is and how many of those we need, to then understanding what engagement really looks like. If I'm looking at raw numbers, do I want the masses to come to my website? Probably not, unless I'm selling something where I need a certain volume or I am selling on price. But if I have understand my total addressable market, I know exactly what my offer is and who my target customer or audience is, then I can hone that in more and understand how to set what my engagement goals are based on what that end goal is. And that's kind of a sandwich metric in between total audience and business goal that gives me an indicator, but I have to look at it through the context of what does it mean to me
It
versus
kind of
am I.
relates back to a metric also, which we keep hearing consistent. But let's take a look at one of the ways of engagement, which is social media posting. Posting on social media. Do you have any recommendations on that for driving engagement?
Yeah, so I definitely am a big proponent of making sure that your message is clear and you are talking as one to one to someone as you can. Just throwing content out there into the universe. It feels more like an impersonal shotgun approach, and anything that you're doing, again, why I love going back to that strategy as our kind of compass, needs to be guided by the value it brings and the purpose behind it. We had a client recently that we brought on, a professional services firm who was working with a different agency, and the marketing manager had inherited that relationship and that scope. And they were doing 3 or 4 blog posts a month and maybe 7 social media posts a week. And she didn't know what or why or see any engagement from it, or saw maybe some engagement, but it didn't translate to anything. So it's a question of, are we doing this just because it's a best practice or somebody says we should do it, or following a checklist, or are we doing it because it's really rooted in something deeper, giving our audience something of value in a value exchange of what they want, versus just throwing our message out there. And I think that's a really good exercise to go through. And the same thing for SEO, for example. You might be, these are all maybe good things you're doing in terms of posting on social or doing, the best practices for SEO for your website. But a collection of good things are a whole collection of tactics. And if they're not rooted back to a strategy and a reason why, and then measured for return on investment, then we're just spending a lot of resources for something that may or may not be
And
helping
military, we
us.
talk about you're taking pot shots in a lot of different directions before you know what direction you need to move in. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're spreading yourself thin, and maybe none of it's effective at the level that just doing one or two things really well would be.
Yeah. And social media, then again, you're getting back to that, it's tough to measure and you don't know where it's going. But wanted to touch on this really briefly. It's a huge subject, but do you have any quick points on how your web design, your website design, can better support digital marketing?
Yeah, so in most cases, what we do in digital marketing sends somebody to our website and so your website being, the things that hold it back often are, issues with user experience or gaps in your content and so when you ask that question, I immediately think of the deficiencies or the negative things. It's almost a process of being least imperfect, more to me, more so than it is of how can we enhance it? Because in many cases, there's something that could be improved upon or optimized or added to it. So naturally, I'm assuming, we're at a point where, we have a great user experience. The pages load fast by Google's Lighthouse or Page Speed Insights scoring, which benefits a user. You have things ADA compliant or compliant to the agreed upon standards out there for the right reasons. It's mobile friendly. That's been a given for a long time, but it meets all these standards at a base level, and then on top of that, again, matches your brand, is engaging. Not, you're not the same color palette, you're not the same layout as everybody else in your industry. You swap out a logo and that's it. But there's time invested and work invested to set it apart and have it be that front door or that accurate reflection of the unique values and aspects of your brand. And then that trickles down into how you display and engage with audiences with the content within it too, when you
So,
pass that first 7-second test.
so kind of a brief recap on the website. Just have a good, clean design that loads quickly, visually appealing, and gets back to that same point you've been mentioning to reinforce the brand. Well, let's talk a little bit on the big game changer blasting everything in every world, which is artificial intelligence, AI. With the limited time we have, how do you see AI changing digital marketing?
Yeah, so it's already started where and it's accelerated a trend that started before AI and before COVID even, of less clicks coming from Google and Google holding on to more of the traffic, directly answering things. But now we have other traffic sources emerging like AI search engines and ways people find information. 10 years ago, the threat was, well, we're now talking to smart speakers. We're not going to a browser and typing in something to ask for information. So we're seeing a further expansion of getting information and data in different places. The one constant is that companies, we want to be found by our target audience wherever they are out there. So we have more sources, more things that we have to pay attention to and optimize for. So there's an even further enhanced need to understand where your target audience is today and where they're going to be next week, next month, and next year, and then not lose track of that. So while we all feel like we're probably behind in leveraging AI. No matter, I'm using it every day, but imposter syndrome and comparing ourselves to where we are as a person or as a company to somebody else. We, finding a balance between being where our customers are and prospects are today and where they're gonna be is a nice sweet spot to stay versus getting lost in the clouds of where it's going and forgetting about what works today, or being so busy with what works today that we get left behind from where it's going
So
tomorrow.
do you see
So
a problem with AI where it kind of changes the rules of how companies are finding you, and you've got to be aware of those rules and change and adapt to that?
Absolutely. And so in many cases, I'm embracing it as a positive, right? If Google is not the dominating force anymore and it's more distributed across various channels, we have opportunities to beat competitors and go be in those other sources and not be as held to whatever Google standard is, with all the mystery and mystique that they put into it
Yeah,
or
they're
don't
changing
tell
their
us things.
algorithms all the time, and
Yeah.
that's throwing a bow wave into the whole world.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's the opportunity for us is to go be where our target audience is and focus on quality and not quantity, and not try to just do the Google strategy for the masses. It will be challenging. It's messy. It won't be perfect, but getting there gives us a huge opportunity to go have competitive advantages.
And so, well, as we're kind of moving towards the end here, my one podcast audience question: what is one thing a podcast listener can do tomorrow morning to start improving the ROI on their digital marketing?
Yeah, so I don't want to blow up anything anybody's doing overall in their marketing, but I would start tomorrow by asking the question, is there any activity that we're doing that I feel like I'm putting a lot of time, effort, or money into, or resources into somewhere, and I have no idea if it's contributing to my bottom line or not? That's probably your best starting point for changing your thinking about what marketing is to the rest of your organization.
So that might help you develop some measurables by taking a look at the different things your different focuses and what you're spending on, and that can help you then start this process of
Yeah, absolutely.
ROI.
Because what it's going to lead you down is one of many different paths. Hopefully, you're not freaked out when you get there and realize how much you're putting into something, but it's a great exercise to shine a flashlight into the dark on something where we just been doing it the same way for 5 years because we did, or somebody said to do this thing, so we did it. Or if you're further along, you do have a plan. It's okay. Did we ever get off a degree or two, and now we're a year out, and maybe it's our metrics aren't fully connected, or did some things with AI recently start blowing up what we were measuring? So
Mhm.
it'll lead you down a trail. I know it's a big loaded question, but based on where you are, it'll lead you down a path of either realizing we need to take a step back and reevaluate everything. Hopefully, that's not too many people out there, but that's a good thing. If so, to make sure that you have conviction behind what you're doing and why. But hopefully, for a lot, it's fine tuning or doing almost your own audit of where your dollars are going and what you're getting back from them to make sure that you know what you're investing in and what your expectations should be.
Sounds like a good exercise to start tomorrow morning for anybody.
Absolutely.
Well, Corey, we reached the end of our digital marketing journey here on today's podcast. Are there any other points you'd like to share?
I think for me personally, a personal learning in the past 6 months has been anchored back to a little bit about what I was talking about with AI of structured and intentional learning. I have a tendency to either go 100% all in and go spend my day in the clouds out in AI world, or get so busy that I don't touch it for a month or two. And so I've had to learn how to personally structure and even create an AI task force across departments in my marketing agency, to add the right level of balance. It's not going to be perfect, but that's one thing I advocate for everyone doing is find structured testing time. So either you need to put it in a box or you need to bring a box out and give
Mhm.
yourself room and space to test, whether that's AI right now or either any other emerging things or things that you need to test to iterate and take your company to the next level.
Well, I think that's a good way to end. Find balance in all these critical things and don't go down a stovepipe ignoring something, but try to look at all the important things every day.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks again for joining me today on the podcast. To learn more about Corey Morris and how his team can help you improve your digital marketing return on investment, please visit voltage.digital or the DMSP.com. I get that right? The DMSP.com, or our podcast website for more information on guests. Thanks for joining us today in this episode of the Home Business Podcast. Share your feedback with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at our website, homebusinessmag.com. Subscribe to the newsletter. For more information, visit homebusinessmag.com or the homebusinessexpo.com. I'm Richard Kamenerson saying anchors away. We'll talk with you soon. Until then, make it a great digital marketing home-based day. Thank you for watching Home Business TV.